Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any technical difficulties whatsoever, you can't hear anything, or you can't see the screen, or really anything whatsoever, please direct either an email, text, or a question box to Debbie Peavy, who will be there monitoring all those channels to make sure that you have a fantastic experience and all your issues are addressed. We also ask everyone to please mute your phone lines and microphones up until the moment you need to speak. We ask you to do that so that we have clear sound and everybody could hear very, very well, and we don't have an echo. For the best possible viewing experience, please keep your browsers in full screen mode. And the last item is that this webinar is being recorded, and if some of you would like, we could make that recording available to you. Next, please. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Tim and leave you in his capable hands for just for a while. Thank you, everyone, again.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that introduction. I just want to say before we begin that we've been working with Mark and SIS and Debbie for many, many years, one of our very valuable partners, and we're very grateful. They've given us the opportunity to present our solution to you all. We're now called SK Global Software. As the beginning of this year, we had previously been named Sandler Kahne Software, but we rebranded because of our more global focus going forward. And as you can see from the slide, we've been very actively involved with the Dynamics product line for many, many years. Today, over 1,350 customers are using our ebanking solutions. That's combined both in the SL, the large majority is in the SL area. We have some more clients in the AX realm as well. As you're going to see, our solutions are very tightly integrated with SL. We'll show that in the demo portion when it comes up. We're actively involved with Microsoft for many years on a partner advisory board, sharing ideas back and forth to bring our solution and make it the most compelling solution that we can. In terms of our awards at the bottom, I'd like to highlight the President's Club. We've been honored for the last 10 years running as a member of Microsoft's President's Club, which represents the top 5% of their partners, which for us that indicates that we're a trusted partner for both Microsoft and our customers, such as yourselves, and our resellers, such as SIS. So that's enough of a background. So let's jump right into Positive Pay. We're going to cover a number of modules, and I have some slides on each, but we'll get to see the actual software. So for those of you that may not be familiar, Positive Pay is a mechanism to reduce fraud. So as you print your checks out of SL and you stuff them, mail them, and send them to your vendors or your employees, we at the same time send a file to the bank. The bank then can use that file to verify that as a check is presented, that it's valid and represents the correct amount and the correct payee. As you can see in the outline below, or the chart below, in terms of fraud perpetrated against companies, checks is by far the highest culprit. And so if you are printing any checks, you definitely want to have Positive Pay. It's a very inexpensive solution, and it prevents those kind of fraudulent activities where you send a $4,200 check out and you find that they've deducted $42,000 or $420,000 out of your account because they've manipulated it. Some of the features in our product, again, of course, is designed to avoid check fraud. And the big thing about Positive Pay is every single bank has many different formats. We provide these formats to you at absolute no charge. There's no programming involved. You simply call us up. We create the format and pop it in your solution. We do have hundreds of formats available. We're creating new ones all the time. And as we do that, we provide them to our customers. So it's a very straightforward process and very easy. We protect both your AP checks and your payroll checks on either side. That's also issues and voided checks as well. We handle multi-account, multi-company situations where sometimes that can be a little tricky with certain formats. We can send the files to the bank either through a browser upload, which is common, but also through a more secure SFTP transmission directly to the bank. The product has an archiving feature, so you can save off your Positive Pay files for later. and you can put security around it such that only certain individuals have access to actually do the process or see the files. So let's take a brief look at the product. The products I'm going to show you today actually are in Dynamics SL 2015. So this is the newest version of Dynamics that came out last fall, and the product you're going to see is from there. So this is the eBanking Suite menu, and those of you familiar with SL already, you can see that it looks and feels very much like your normal SL menu. It's built right in, and it becomes one of the modules in the menu. I'm going to go over to file formats where we maintain those formats that I talked about. And as you can see in Positive Pay, tens and tens of formats covering number of banks. We add them all the time. So do not fear, your bank will be covered here. So you simply select it, check it off, and then you can use it. The process to send the file to the bank is very straightforward. It's under this AP Processes area, Create and Send a File. This menu option actually is shared with EFT and Wire Transfer Plus. I'll talk about that in another section. But here with Positive Pay, you simply come in here, select, create a new eBanking file you're going to send to the bank, check off the batches. Again, this would be an SL check batch, manual check batch in this case. It could be a computer check batch, it could be a void check batch, etc. You simply select it, then just hit begin processing. It's that easy. What this is doing now is creating the file on the system, and then I've got this set up to actually launch a website. This is PNC Bank. Again, the formats are different for every bank. This is one that's going to go to PNC, so this should launch the browser for PNC. Looks like my image is getting warmed up here, so in a second the browser should open. But the process is so straightforward. 2 mouse clicks, your file's going to the bank. As you can see here, what we do is have a history of the files that have gone to the bank. So you've got a recorded history of those transmissions that have previously been done. It shows the total dollar amounts, the number of batches that are in those files themselves. So again, the image is getting a little warmed up. Of course, previous to the webinar, this was running very quickly. And of course, that's the nature of a webinar, right? So there we go. Launch the browser. It'll open up the PNC website, and then you would go and upload the file. Most websites will have a login for Positive Pay, and they'll have a different one maybe for EFTs, etc. So this will display, I promise you. And this will go much smoother on the next time I open it. So it's just warming itself up. In any case, here it comes. Here's the PNC site. So you would log in and send the file to the bank. When you're done, you simply close the browser, and then the next step will be actually there'll be a keep delete. Very similar to when you're printing checks, you have a keep or delete, meaning that you successfully uploaded the file to the bank. So I'm going to just keep it now. It finishes the process. It archives the file if need be, and then you've got the transaction recorded here as well. So very easy, very straightforward. Formats are available. Simply select your check batches, send to the bank, and then you've got a recorded history. When you're on a particular file, you can go and look at the details to see what checks were in it. You can actually look and see what the actual files look like that went to the bank. So that's Positive Pay, a very straightforward module, very easy to use, very easy to implement. Come back over here, closed out this. Sorry, I got myself out of kilter here. So now we'll move over to electronic funds transfer. So the APEFT product module is designed to produce files for the U.S. standard NACHA format. Very common in the U.S., very low-cost way to send transmissions electronically, again, the standard NACHA format. Not only does it create those files in that format, but it includes bank communications and a very robust email notification functionality. So you can send email remittances to your customer, to your vendors after you've sent the file. So in terms of the value proposition for EFT, we have an ROI study here where one customer expected 80% of their vendors to accept electronic transfers. So when they did that, they looked at the cost of printing checks, which included $21,000 in postage, They found almost an annual savings of $65,000. So a very high ROI on a module like this to transfer over from printing checks to doing payments electronically. Let's take a look at some of the features. In the ACH area, there are different transaction types. Some of you may be familiar with them, and may be a little technical for others. But we support these different kinds that support payments to individuals, payments to corporations, additional addenda information called CCD+, and an IAT transaction which has to do with doing international ACHs as well, all part of the module. In addition, we support federal and state tax payments, electronic tax payments, and child support payments. Those are variations on the PPD, CCD, CCD+. The module also includes the email remittance part that I mentioned. It has an option to be able to send attachments. So if you want to not have all the remittances in the body of the email itself, you can do it as an attachment. The emails can be customized. So we have a standard layout, but we have many ways in which you can customize them and make them your own. A typical email might look something like this, where we'll have the details. You can configure this to your suiting. You can have a subject line that's your own. The header area can be designed. This whole area where we have the payment amounts and then the invoice information as well. And then a number, you have multiple payments with multiple invoices. Again, this is the kind of email that would go out to your vendors. When we create the files, which I'll talk about, the important piece to note is that, as you know, in SL, you create a check batch in order to print checks. For SL to use this feature, we have to split your vouchers into two batches, a check batch that you print through checks, and then some other kind of batch. And what we have done is automated that process that actually create a manual check batch, fully automated. Normally, of course, you use the manual check batch to do it one check at a time. However, we've got an automated way to take all your payment selections and put them into a manual check batch. So then you don't have to print anything, and then from the manual check batch, we can go and send the file to the bank. I'll show that in my demonstration. We have a feature called account change security to prevent internal fraud or to just provide better compliance for procedures, meaning that if someone changes sensitive banking information, that another individual that's been designated has to approve that change before that vendor can be authorized to send payments to that vendor. We also have what's called amount security, so that you can control the dollar amounts that go out the door, and so such that if the amount of the batch is greater than a certain dollar amount, then a certain individuals have to approve it before it can go out the door. So this is much like having multiple signatures on a check that usually gets passed around to different authorities. And our version 10 product, which has evolved over time now allows multiple accounts per vendor. So you may have one vendor in SL, but in fact now you've got multiple different accounts, different bank accounts, different formats, different banks. You can set that up to pay multiple accounts per one vendor. This came out of where a particular vendor might be an institution that has many contracts, and then a company, a construction company that has many contracts, and then you can electronically send an invoice, pay an invoice to a different contract, which would end up in a different bank account for that one vendor. Again, we can transmit via a browser upload or integrating with an FTP client that can do secure FTP uploads as well. Let's jump over and take a look at the product in action. So what I've done is, let me go first to vendor banking entry. This is where the banking information is stored in SL. Of course, you have your normal SL maintenance screen for vendors. We have an additional screen where we add additional information. I'm going to bring up a particular vendor here. And in this screen is where we record the kind of information you would expect for banking. What kind of a format are they using? This is US ACH. They have a prearranged payment or deposit, which is called a PPD for individuals. Transit routing and account number information is recorded here, checking or savings account. This is where you establish the email setup that you're going to need to send the payment off. So you add this information to your standard SL vendors. This is not You're not replacing the vendors, you're just adding additional information for the vendors. So I've already gone in and added a couple of payments, a couple of vouchers. Let me go bring up that voucher batch. Again, if you haven't seen 2015, you'll see notice some changes in terms of the lookups. The PV now has a filter option and has a little different look and feel. This is the first voucher I have in here, and what you'll notice that we've added here through the VBA customization, what account and what payment method are you using? In this case, PPD. In the same batch, I happen to have another voucher. And this now is another vendor, a different vendor, IDO, and they're being paid by SL check. So you can mix and match. You can have some of your vendors are paid electronically and some are not paid electronically. I'm going to go through and select those vouchers for payment. I could do it through the normal payment selection, or kind of a quick and dirty way is just to do it directly and edit select documents for payment. So I'm going to select these bottom two. And so I've got a couple of a $900 batch. Save those. So now what we've done is created a payment selection batch. Normally, of course, you go and run that through your check printing process or go through a review. The step that we need to introduce is called a payment selection filter, part of the ebanking suite. This filter does the magic to split the batch into multiple pieces. So what it did, it brought up the batch and it said, okay, inside the batch I see there's a transaction that goes to the computer check batch. Remember that was one. And then there's another one that should go for ACH. So what it did, it actually split it into two pieces. When I begin processing, it walks us through, and what it does is actually go and create a second batch, which now is a manual check batch. So if you had 500 vouchers and 300 were for EFTs or ACHs, it would create a new batch with those 500 the EFTs in a separate batch for itself. The computer checks are left in its own batch. So I can go here, I can actually drill into that computer check, or the manual check batch, and what I've got, it's a type of electronic payment. We actually can control the number sequence as well with an alpha in the front. So now we have a batch that has the electronic payment in it. We also have a batch that's got the computer check. The computer check batch you'd run through the normal processing. For the EFT part, those of you who are thinking like we did the positive pay, we use that same screen, and we do a very similar thing that we did with positive pay. Bring up the screen, we run a new file, checks off that manual check batch. It brings it in. There's the batch up here. It was a voucher for $400, not processed yet. Again, we just say begin processing. It's walking through the process, creating the file. In this case, it's launching the website. Did prime the pump there a little bit better on the website. So now this happens to be going to the Bank of America. So as you can see, you can have multiple banks that are doing different things in your business. You may have a disbursement account. You may have a concentration account, et cetera. So again, in this case, you would upload it. You could do a secure upload, and it would automatically process that. And then once you've uploaded to the bank, you'll get a prompt to say, do you want to keep or delete the batch? Just like we had with positive pay. That's poking along here a little bit. There it is. So we go and do a complete. And now remember, we created that manual check batch. So those of you that aren't using a system like this, you probably go to the bank and do your ACHs, and then you come back and create a manual check batch, and then you post it. Of course, you have double entry. Here we have the single entry, and now we also are going to automate the releasing of the manual check batch. It's also sending the email, as you saw there. We get an indication that the emails, one was sent, none failed. And there we have it. The process completes itself, and now you can come in again, just like positive pay. You can drill into the details. You can see that those vouchers that were paid. You can go into the file details, and this is an ACH file for those of you that have any interest in that. So that's the process. Very straightforward. Your voucher entry is identical the way it was before. You just designate how you pay the vendors. You do payment selection as you normally would. Nothing different about that. And then you do that one extra step to split the batches so that you get a batch that's exclusively electronic payments and others that are checks, and run it through the create and send process to send it to the bank. So that's AP-EFT. Let's move over to Wire Transfer Plus. So what's the difference? So with ACH, with EFT, we mentioned it handles strictly nacho transactions. Wire Transfer Plus, and the plus is critical here, handles everything else other than ACHs. So any kind of bank transaction type. So every bank, most banks have a proprietary format outside of ACH. Within that format, they can do all kinds of things. Typically, it may be wires. So a very common one is a domestic wire or a foreign wire. You can also do outsourced check printing. You could send a file to your bank, and they can print the checks for you. You can fund P-cards. And something that's becoming more common is actual what's called a virtual card, where you send a file to the bank. They then put it on a portal, and actually they put that amount on a temporary virtual credit card. Your vendor gets paid off of that credit card, and then you as a owner of the dynamic system, you get a spiff based on those payments. So we have a number of folks that do it with Fifth Third, with Chase, with Wells Fargo, with Bank of America. Most of them have this new virtual card mechanism. In fact, some with a proprietary format, you can actually send ACHs within it, and that's kind of a little corner case. Again, bank communications is identical to EFT, and the email notification as well, exactly the same. So in terms of those formats, the difference is with US ACH, that's a standard in the U.S. On our website, on our page for Wire Transfer Plus, we have a list of the various formats we have to do that. So we have, I think, 70 or 80 banks around the world. Of course, the SEPA is becoming more prevalent in Europe. And then the many standard banks, Bank of America has many different formats. You can see it gets a little bit detailed. And so if you want to use Wire Transfer Plus, please be sure you contact us and verify that we've got the format for your bank. We can, if we don't have it, we can produce it for you at a nominal charge. These are quite a bit more complex than a positive pay file, so there is a nominal charge. In terms of the features, the process flow is absolutely identical. You have your vendors, you designate instead of US ACH as the format, some kind of wire format. You set them up with the banking information. It could be, if it's a Fed wire, it could be just your ACH type information. But if you're doing a Swift wire or a foreign wire, you would put in maybe a Swift code or an ABA number or a IBAN number. In addition, we can support beneficiary bank information, intermediary bank information, credit party information, bank instructions, as you would know about that. Wires are processed by the Federal Reserve versus the NACHA system. They're guaranteed within 6 hours, and as you probably know, they're quite a bit more expensive. ACH is typically about 10 cents a transaction. Wires are more typically in the $10, $20, $30, $40 range. Email remittances are identical. All the remittance information is listed there, customized the same. The formats are plugged in again. You have your system, you're set up, and you decide you want wire. You contact us if we need to do a format. You can then just run a SQL script and put an RPT in your folder, and you're ready to go and send wires. Again, different kinds of things, domestic and foreign wires, as I mentioned, the P-cards, virtual pay, and outsourced checks. The account change security is identical. Amount approval security is identical. Again, you can have multiple accounts for a vendor. So for a vendor, you could set up an ACH account, and you could set up a wire account. You may regularly send them ACH transactions, but every once in a while they want that wire because they want it that day. So you just select a voucher and change it over and send it via wire. Again, the transmission is the same. There's not a lot of difference. I'll just jump over and show something a little bit different here, but the process is identical, as I mentioned. I won't even bother going through it. So I've got another vendor here, Pilar, that's set up with the Bank of America. This is a wire format, and Pilar is set up to do a Fed wire, but could do a Swift wire or any of these other types of transactions as well. You'll notice that a number of data fields now open up on the screen when we find out that a wire is involved. So this could be an ABA number, but this could be an IBAN number. It can be any kind of combinations of those things. Again, these are these extra fields that open up that you need for a wire: the beneficiary name and address, the beneficiary bank, intermediary bank, credit party, bank instructions, etc. Email is exactly the same as it was for ACH. So other than that, there's virtually no difference. The processing is identical. In terms of file formats, again, we have tens and tens of those wire formats, and you can see they cover banks all around the world. a number of these from foreign entities, foreign countries, and then a number in the U.S. We have many more than this, actually, because we don't distribute the product with every single format. You can simply add them at any time. So that's the Wire Transfer Plus module. We've got two more modules now that have to do with AR on the AR side of the house. The first one is AR Electronic Funds Transfer. This is when you have a customer where it's appropriate in terms of your business operations, they will allow you to draft funds from their account. This can be used in places where you have subscriptions, loan management, or if you're working with a distributor that allows you to have a regular business relationship, and they've said, okay, the invoices you've sent me, you're allowed to come and collect on those invoices. So this is typically done with a standard notcha format. We can do a reverse wire as well, where we can do a wire draw. And again, the bank communications and email notification is virtually identical to the AP EFT. So it's an exact mirror. Remember, with the AP, we set up vendors and we sent invoices and we paid those invoices. In AR, of course, you've created invoices that you want to collect from your customers, and what we do is go reference those. I'll show that in a minute. And then we draw against those invoices and then go collect money against your customer's account and then deposit it in your Dynamics SL cash account. The ACH, PPD, and CCD are used. The way we manage it in terms of knowing what invoices to collect is using the terms code that's on the invoice. So you designate a certain terms code that means EFT collection, and you set up your either a customer, because most of those invoices need to be collected through electronic funds transfer, or on an individual basis. You could have a customer where certain invoices could be collected through AR EFT. The invoices get auto-selected. I'll show that in the demo in a minute. And then after we create the file, we send it to the bank just like we did with AP EFT, but in that case, now the bank goes into the customer's account, pulls the money from that account and deposits into your Dynamics SL cash account. At the end of that process, we automatically do a payment application batch, as if you did a cash application within SL. So completely ties that process up end to end. And again, we send an email to the customer saying we just pulled money from your account. Surprise, surprise. Hopefully it's not a surprise. But in any case, they then are notified that those funds have been withdrawn from their account. Again, sending the file to the bank, you don't send it to your customer, you send it over to the bank. The bank then puts it into the system and does that draw. Let's take a look at how that's a little bit different. So again, in the same eBanking Suite menu, there's the Customer Banking Entry screen. And this screen looks virtually identical to the vendor screen. Actually, you can see it's titled Vendor or Customer Banking Entry. But now we just go against your customer master list. So I've got a couple set up for this. Again, very similar look and feel, saying what entry class are we going to use to withdraw funds from the customer's account, what is their bank account, and what is their account number. Email setup is identical. Again, set up to say what emails do you want to send it to. And that's about all there is to it. So you go and set up your invoices the way you normally would. So if I go into accounts receivable, AR, for those of you that use the AR module, again, this only applies if you've got the AR module, where the AP, Wire Transfer Plus, Positive Pay relate to AP. This relates to AR. If I bring up a batch, I believe I have something here that's got an EFT. Yes. So I have a customer here, the C300, and you can see the terms code. It's been set up with a special code. You can designate this to be whatever you want. You could have EF for EFT collection. You could have ER for electronic receivable or electronic receivable or whatever you want to do. And it's that code that's going to tell us that this invoice should be collected electronically. So once we've got that set up, as you may have gathered, we go down here into our processes, AR create and send and receive files. This application is used both for the lockbox processing, which I'll cover in a minute, and for AR EFT as well. On the AR EFT side, again, same process as we said before, except that now what we're doing is looking at invoice batches that are in AR, that we found inside those invoice batches, there's some of those invoices that need to be collected electronically. There's a drill down here that you can actually go down into those invoice batches and see the actual transactions that we're going to pick. And they will be auto-selected, but then you could even manually override them if you have rights to do that. Once you've made that selection, you come back here into this screen. It's been brought in. Again, it's the very same process as before. Simply check it off. It's warning us that we've already sent it to the bank once, and normally you wouldn't want to do that. But because this is a demo, we can do whatever we would like to do. And so now what I'm going to do is just begin processing. It's going to go and access that batch. It's going to pull all the items out that need to be collected. It's going to, again, launch the bank website. So now we upload the file to the bank. So it seems a little counterintuitive. We're pushing this to the bank, but actually in the file itself is going to pull money from your customer's account into your account. A nice thing to do if you can do it and have it set up. And then this final step, as it's got here, it can actually create the payment application batch. I think I've already run this once before, so I don't want to do 2 payment application batches, so I won't do that. But the process is identical to AP. You would go and do the payment application batch, send out the emails to your customers saying, I've just withdrawn money from your account in this amount. These are the invoices that you've now paid. And that finishes the process off. And again, just as before, you can drill into the details for that type of transaction. So that's it's a little variation on what we did with AP, but it's virtually kind of a mirror. Again, not quite as commonly used because, number one, not as many people use the AR module in SL, but those that have that certain kind of relationship with their customers can be very, very valuable, very handy. Let's take a look at the last module we want to talk about. Again, this is related to AR, and it's used to bring in a traditional lockbox file. So lockbox file, of course, a lockbox is where your bank manages a mailbox. You have your customers send their checks into that mailbox. The bank monitors it, opens the mailbox, takes it to the bank, makes the deposit, and then typically they'll either print out PDFs or make images of the file, of the checks, and or create an electronic file. And that's what we need to get, is an electronic file that has the details of those checks. It can be a comma delimited, fixed field, or a BAI2 file. We'll talk about that. However, if you do have files that might not come through a traditional lockbox, but they have remittance information, we can use those as well. And the goal of this module is to identify at least who is the SL customer that made this payment. Because if we can identify that, then we can put the money on account. So we can say that at least they sent you this kind of money. Even better yet, do we have invoice information that we can go and do cash application against an invoice? And this will automate the process. The screen you see here is the workbench, the payment application workbench. And so what happens is we bring the file in, it goes into this workbench which does all the work, and the end result is, as you can see at the top, we're going to create an AR batch, a payment application batch. And so that's going to finish the process. I'm going to walk through it in a little more detail. But that's the goal, the be-all, end-all of the module. So it's designed for high-volume cash receipts. So if any of you out there have a lockbox or other kinds of incoming remittance information that may be more than 50 a day, we have people that have a couple thousand items per day. So as you can imagine, that kind of volume could be very tedious. Certainly everyone would like to have a couple thousand cash receipts every day. That would be a nice business to have. The product does auto invoice application. So as we bring it in, we interrogate different pieces of information. We can look at transit routing and account number on the check to figure out who the customer is. Once we've identified that once and made that match, the next time we see a check with that transit routing and account number, we know who the customer is. The invoice information, if it's coded in the file, then of course we can look that up and determine the customer and do the application. That workbench is used to refine those settlements. I'll touch on that in a second. It handles automatic split payments. So in some businesses, you'll get a payment from say a holding company, and it's paying invoices for 2 or 3 other companies, and they're set up as different customers in SL. As you know, in SL, to do a payment, you've got to identify the customer first. When we see that, when we see multiple invoices under one payment and they're with different companies, we'll actually split that check into multiple checks. So the same check number, let's say we have a check for $100, and say $60 goes to one company and $40 to another, we would create actually as if we got two checks with the same check number, one for $60 and one for $40, and apply it to two different companies. That can happen automatically. We can automatically take discounts, and we can match up against credit memos. If we get credits in, we can match that up against credit memos. And as I mentioned previously, if you don't have a lockbox, because that just doesn't ring a bell, well, we're a company, we don't use lockboxes, but you do get files or have information. So maybe you have a website, e-commerce site, where you're collecting credit card information, and you've got a file that has information related to remittances. It's possible that that could be used by this process. In addition, maybe you don't have anything at all and you've got a bunch of checks on your desk, but you don't have lockbox. Just think if you could key in the invoice number, the check number, and the check amount, say 3 pieces of information, and just put that into an Excel spreadsheet, and just very quickly for each check you did that, and then you have that file come in and get processed automatically. A lot easier than going and looking up the customer if you don't know who the customer is. That invoice number can be a very positive way to look up and identify those. The files that come in, different layout types we have, fixed field, comma, delimited. BAI2 is very common standard, the banking standard in the U.S. And we can handle centralized cash as well, such that if the invoices are from different companies, that can be handled. And multi-currency, so if we get different currencies for different invoices, that can be handled as well. Let me quickly just show you the screen here, and then we'll get over to some questions and answers here in a second. So the same screen that we use for AR, we use for lockbox processing. The first part of the process is to grab the file. So we could, this sub-menu option allows you to go to a browser and pull down your files. You can have them emailed to you. You can, any way you get the file onto your system. These are files that have been brought into the system. You just check them off and import them. I've already done that. When you brought a file in, it gets recorded here as a workbench record. So I've got a workbench record here, and I can just highlight that record and then go into the workbench. This is the result of the import. This one is very straightforward. Let me use the second one, a little more complex. And so what happens is the file gets brought in based on the invoice information, these invoice numbers over here. It may have determined what the customer was, or there are different ways, but like I said, the transit routing and account number can identify that. And within each, then you can see the applications that were done automatically. It automatically did this application. So when I go and finish this process and create an AR batch, it's going to go and do the cash application of this payment against the invoices that it found. These are the ones that it did automatically. Down at the bottom are those that needed more research. So we brought something here and said that the file could not, the invoice number could not be found. Maybe it was keyed incorrectly. Many different ways to do lookups here to do the research. We do have a nice customer document lookup option here that we can go and look at all our documents by different ways. We can search by balances. We can search by numbers to locate those particular invoices. Once we identify them and click a button, we can bring it back in here. And once we've got a correct value, we just move it up here to the good grid. You just check it off and then move the item to the upper grid. The goal, of course, is to get all your items into this upper grid and then create your AR payment batch. So that's the process kind of end to end. Again, if you have AR and you have files that need that, we found many customers find this to be a very, very valuable application. So that covers the different areas I wanted to touch on. We have a few little items here at the end before we get into a question and answer period. So how do we price the product, again, and how do you purchase it? You purchase it through your SL reseller, SIS. We work with them for many, many years. They're very knowledgeable about our products. They'd be glad to help you. As you've seen, the suite consists of 5 modules. You can purchase any combination of those. You do not have to purchase the whole suite, so you can get one module at a time. However, if you do purchase multiple modules, you can get a discount. This has to be purchased at the same time. So if you get 3 of the modules, you pay 18%. You get an 18% discount against all those 3 modules. The product has been out for many, many years. It has its roots actually back into the 80s and 90s of the previous century. I hate to even say that, kind of scary. But we're also very, very current. So our product was actually put out on 2015 CU1 a few weeks ago, and so we're very current with the latest technology. However, those of you that haven't upgraded yet, the product also works very nicely with previous versions of SL. Certainly feel free to go to our website, sksoft.com, for more information, and or, of course, go to SIS and use their resources. Again, they're very knowledgeable about the product. On our website, we have demo videos, so you can see videos that cover a lot of what we covered today. Of course, this is being recorded, and we have data sheets if you want to download those PDFs and share them amongst your colleagues. So that really covers what I wanted to cover. I turn it back over to Debbie and Mark to guide the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Tim. We really appreciate it. That was a very detailed explanation and a good way to see the products straight from the person who is instrumental in building them. At this point, we would like to see if there's any questions that any of the attendees would like to ask. Please go ahead and use the question box, and we will direct them to Tim and get them answered. If you would, please type the questions into the chat box on your toolbar.
Is it possible, Mark, that I explained things too well?
It would appear to be this. I guess we will stay here for a few more minutes to see if anybody might have any additional questions, and if not, again, I just want to see. Well, we have a couple of questions right now. Kevin Chan is asking if Manulife Bank is supported. Tim, would you please answer that? What
was the name of the bank?
Manulife. It's Manulife, M-A-N-U-L-I-F-E, Manulife.
Okay.
It's a Canadian bank.
Yes, so we deal with many Canadian banks, Bank of Montreal, RBS, Scotia, CIBC, etc. That particular one I had not heard of, but virtually there's never been a bank that we've encountered that we can't build a format for in terms of wires or for positive pay. So I don't know if you stumped me, but in terms of that bank name, that's not familiar. But we've done a lot of things with banks all across the U.S., hundreds of banks, and across Canada as well, Latin America and Europe. So I'm very confident to say that we can deal with that particular bank, but I have not yet heard of it.
Thank you. Kevin, I feel fairly comfortable that if you're interested in the product, Tim will be more than happy to address the specific format that Manulife Bank might have for the file. We have two more questions, both asked by Julie Davis. Question number one is, I noticed that you demonstrated the EFT module starting at the Edit Select Document screen. Can you select documents from the payment selection screen?
Yes, absolutely. There's just, as you probably know, there are different ways you can do it, and there's no particular restriction or requirement by our software to do it. It's just that I find it very quick and easy to do that. But certainly 03500, the payment selection screen, can be used just as effectively and exactly in the same way as I did with the other.
Thank you, Tim. Another question just came in from Brian Blaha. The question is, in the AP EFT module, if there is an issue with a transfer, how does one troubleshoot this?
Well, it's a very good question. So there can be different kinds of things that can occur. Certainly the file might not successfully have gone to the bank, and you have to figure that out. Most banks, you can go to their site and see the files that they've received. If you do a browser upload when you're on the site, you'll get an authentication. If you do an FTP transfer, you can have a communication piece that comes back and lets you know that. Another type of fault that can occur is you send the file successfully, but they go and try to deposit the money in a vendor's account, but the vendor's account is closed. And so they'll send you some information back. Very easily to deal with because as we mentioned, I'm creating manual check batches, and so effectively in SL, it thinks that an electronic payment is a manual check, but as you noticed, it's got an EP type. So you can just go into void check in SL, and then you do a void check against that document that will take the cash back, put the cash back into your paying account, and release that voucher for future payment. So all of those kind of things that can go wrong, there are very, very comfortable and easy ways to resolve it after the fact.
Thank you. And Tim, we have one more question, which is actually an interesting one from Kevin Chen. The question is, our company requires 2 signing officers on wire payments. Will they sign off or approve from SL or on the financial institution website or some other tool? So would you please comment on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. So whatever we do can be exactly incorporated into what you do at your bank. So right now, if you're going into the bank site and entering wire information and then saving it, and then it requires a second login to verify that transaction, that can work fine. So we can send the file to the bank, and that can be sent under one login, and then subsequently you can just notify the controller or whoever else needs to go in and verify, yes, that 10,000 wasn't changed to 100,000 by mistake, and so that you can do it exactly the same way you've been doing that way. In addition, you can have controls within SL, so you can actually have the create and send process controlled by a different individual. We have that amount approval feature such that you can actually say if there's anything in a wire batch that's over a certain dollar amount, that if someone has to actually go into that screen and enter a password, and then that will validate and allow that to go out the door. So there are different ways you can do it. And we found that over the years, most people find it comfortable one way or another, but security is always a concern that we have. And so we have not only that account security, but we have what we call, I just described, the amount security as well.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
At this point, it seems like we have answered all of the questions. So what we will do is we'll wait for a couple of minutes just to see if any new questions may come up. I guess they're not. So since there are not any, so since we've answered all the questions, we'll go ahead and move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for participating in this webinar. If you would like more information or you think of a question that you didn't ask today, please don't hesitate and contact Alicia Simpson at the email that you are seeing at your screen, which is tsimpson@sisn.com. And please contact Talisha for both scheduling a more personalized demonstration of the product or any questions, whatever they may be. Please address them all to Talisha and we'll get them resolved. Another item we wanted to bring to your attention is that a premier event coming up very shortly, Microsoft Dynamics SL User Group for 2015 Fall Conference is coming up very, very shortly, and both SK Global and SIS are very proud to be sponsors of this event, and we wanted to bring to your attention the fact that early registration ends on May 31st, which is in just a couple of days. The event will take place on September 16th through 18th in San Antonio. And as an organization that was instrumental in originally creating the user group, we feel that it's an absolutely invaluable resource where you will have an opportunity to meet other professionals from your peer group that are using Dynamics SL, and have an opportunity to collaborate on how they do things and how you're using the product, and kind of share each other's experience and learn from each other's experience with the product, and have some additional ideas on how to improve your business. And one last item I wanted to add is the fact that when a significant group of premier Microsoft Dynamics SL customers come together and speak to Microsoft in a single voice, then Microsoft really listens. And a lot of times during these Dynamics SL conference, Microsoft sends an executive to listen in on what is being said, how people are using the product, and any suggestions that come out of these meetings relative to the future direction of the product. So all of those really good, valuable opportunities, and I want to urge everyone to please take advantage of the Microsoft Dynamics SL user group meeting. And at this point, I want to mention just one last thing, is that Microsoft Dynamics SL 2015 is absolutely ready for prime time. We're all excited about the product here at SIS. We have been scheduling a number of upgrades for customers, and there's a significant number of improvements to both feature and function of the product, as well as the architecture and UI. And I'm sure you will find that Microsoft Dynamics SL 2015 is going to be a big improvement to your ERP system, and will do a tremendous job helping to manage your business's financials. Again, thank you, everyone. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes just in case someone wants to ask another question. And short of that, please enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and thank you again for participating.